But as we all know, President Trump suddenly sent out a tweet after on December 20th saying martial law equals fake news, just more knowingly bad reporting. President Trump's statement is very brief, yet very significant. This is the first time President Trump has publicly expressed his attitude on martial law. Why did President Trump make this statement? Let us analyze this from 4 aspects. Number 1, the idea of martial law has been circulating since the election day on November 3rd, so it's nothing new. We have to look at the timing of this statement. This was tweeted in the early morning of December 20th. We all know what had happened 2 days before that. On Friday, December 18th, President Trump held a sudden White House meeting which involved an intense discussion about martial law. Then on Saturday, the 19th, the left-stream media began to report for the first time that President Trump was interested in martial law. From the tone of President Trump's tweet, it is the same tone he has been using with the leftist mainstream media. He has consistently used fake news to refer to them, and there have been no exceptions. So what he is actually trying to do is to refute the leftist media's reporting. In his tweet, President Trump said, martial law equals fake news, implying that he was not considering martial law. Has President Trump never considered martial law? He did not mention it in his tweet, but from other sources of information that we have so far, President Trump definitely did consider this option. So it's wrong to say that President Trump has never considered martial law at all. So why did the president issue such a statement? This brings us to the second point. There is a so-called voice of reason from within the President Trump administration and among the Washington politicians. The leftist politicians or left-wing politicians have been debating whether President Trump's effort to overturn the election results is a coup, a self-coup, or both. We all understand the term coup, but self-coup means that a leader, after having obtained power through legal means, expands on power that are not available under normal circumstances. In political science, it usually means that the political system will change from constitutional to dictatorial. Of course, this is what leftist politicians have been discussing, which is skewed from the actual situation. Even if President Trump did adopt martial law, it is based on a considerable amount of public opinion. Moreover, this is not unprecedented in American history, so it would not be considered as a coup of any kind at all. However, this is what the leftist politicians have been talking about. They believe that President Trump truly has the intention to do so. But they also argue that President Trump lacks the ability to mobilize the military in order to impose martial law and overturn the results. For example, President Trump could invalidate all mail-in ballots received after Election Day. This would favor his case before the Supreme Court. If these votes are invalidated, it would improve President Trump's performance on the Electoral College ballot. Secondly,
이 투표들을 무효화했다면 다른 주 의원들에게 선거 결과를 인정하지 않는 것에 확신을 심어줬을 것이다. 트럼프 대통령이 이 지역에서 의미 있는 진전을 이루지 못했기 때문에 두 가지 모두가 다 불분명해졌다.
The voice of reason believes President Trump also does not have the conditions of the George W. Bush Jr. and Al Gore in the Florida case back in 2000. At that time, there was an election controversy in only one state. In the beginning, Bush Jr. was only leading the Democrat Party's Al Gore by less than 2,000 votes. After the first recount, Bush Jr.'s advantage shrunk to less than 1,000 votes. In this case, the law has greater premise to intervene. However, President Trump filed lawsuits in multiple states. In addition, the difference in votes between President Trump and Joe Biden are more than a few thousand. And the so-called voice of reason is different from our normal understanding. They believe that most of the controversial issues of the election are baseless and insufficient to change the outcome. In addition, the voice of reason also believes even if President Trump does want to initiate martial law and uses extraordinary means to overturn the results, he must receive practically unanimous support from the entire Republican Party. Unfortunately, the reality is that even some of President Trump's loyalists opposes some of the practices and label them as radical. For these reasons, the voice of reason is resisting President Trump's actions, and those holding the same opinion are the majority in the Democratic and Republican parties, and even in the White House. In my personal opinion, President Trump is a president who cares a lot about his image. In the absence of widespread internal support, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of President Trump keeping in line with the democratic constitutionalism for the sake of his reputation. Even though many of his supporters believe that implementing martial law is perfectly justified and can save the country in these extraordinary times. Of course, there may be other factors. So what will President Trump do if he does not implement martial law, given the resistance from all these factors? That's the third point we want to discuss. He wants to place his hope on January 6th, when the joint session of Congress certifies the results. At that time, Republicans in both houses will join forces to challenge the Electoral College vote, especially in key states. If the challenge in both houses are successful, then Congress can initiate a contingent election. However, from my personal point of view, I don't see a guaranteed chance of victory in doing so. First of all, as I just said, you can't just simply come in and change the election. The Republicans in both houses have to join efforts first. One house isn't enough. Both the Senate and House of Representatives have to do it. After this condition is met, both chambers have to pass their challenges through a vote before the contingent election can be held. Secondly, there is still a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, and the 2 seats in the Senate are still waiting for the runoff election in Georgia on January 5th. It is still unknown who will win these 2 seats. President Trump is also planning to go to Georgia again on January 4th to give Republicans a boost, hoping that the Republicans will win and increase their chances of victory on January 6th. However, if problems with election systems continues, then the Democrats will have an equal number of seats with the Republicans in the Senate. So it is still unknown whether both houses of Congress can pass a challenge to the electoral vote results. Moreover, there are still Republicans in the Congress that favor the Democrats. There is a possibility that they may betray the Republicans at the critical moment. As one American Twitter user said, "My issue is if we wait till January 6th, how can we trust and assume that state delegates will vote for Trump? We have too many traitors and treasonous actors on the Republican side that are now showing their true colors." What the Americans are now worried about is the joint session of Congress Vice President Pence will chair. If you recall the discussion from our previous videos, that session will be President Trump's last hope for a legal way to overturn the election results. As a senior politician in Washington, Vice President Pence has been very supportive of President Trump. How would he perform at the joint session of Congress? That is the focus of public attention. President Trump is not the one directing the session. We will have to wait and see how he performs at the joint session. Next is the fourth reason behind President Trump's denial of martial law, which is the consistency of the military's action. The special forces theoretically have the ability to carry out martial law, but in the actual implementation process, those Army generals who are only loyal to the Constitution, what role will they play? They are in control of a large number of troops and weapons. Although according to the statement, they may or may not participate, but their attitudes cannot be ignored. Many soldiers are loyal to President Trump, but some are not. After taking into consideration the reality, perhaps President Trump is considering the risk of actually using the military to carry out orders. But what can be accomplished without any risk?